How many of you have seen videos like the one at the top right here on YouTube? Top 10 reasons why we know the Earth is round. Well, first of all, round doesn't just apply to a globe. I see a bunch of people sitting at round tables right here. So you need to lose that word. The video I'm going to show you, it took me a long time to do this. When I first started looking into this, long before I ever committed to what I believe now, I looked at these videos. I mean, like everybody else, I started out as a skeptic. I'm going to disprove this, start looking for videos and stuff, easy things to prove that the Earth's a globe, right? So you do a Google search, and that's one of the videos that pops up. It's got several million views. Top 10 reasons why we know the Earth is round. Back in 2015, early in 2015, I watched that video, and even before even considering becoming a flat earther, I thought, wow, I could easily debunk all of those. Not even being committed. So your top 10 reasons aren't that impressive. So what I did was I sat down, and I know a lot of others did the same thing. I started to show how they're easily debunked and did videos on it. And of course, brevity's never been my strong point. If you look up my videos, I got a playlist for the top 10 reasons. Somebody else, Seventh Day Truth Seeker, combined all of my videos. It came out to over 6 hours long. So I took those 6 hours and did my best to try to distill it down for something that I can use in this presentation. So for the next 45 minutes, you're going to see a condensed version of my debunking the top 10 reasons. If you want to see the rest of them, if you've got 6 hours of time, you can watch the longer one on my YouTube channel. So here we go, debunking the top 10 reasons.
Number 10. All the other planets and stars we've ever seen are round, and there's no reason to indicate that the Earth should be any different.
Okay, that's an interesting assumption, but it's not a proof. It's like looking at a pool table and saying, wow, all the billiard balls are spherical. Well, that means the table must be too. Or looking up and seeing the lights overhead. Oh, the light bulbs are spherical, therefore the table must be too. No, that's not a proof of anything.
Number 9. Time zones. Day and night happen at different times at different places on Earth. In fact, it's always day somewhere and night somewhere else.
Okay, time zones. I think part of the problem is people who come from the spinning heliocentric globular Earth model, as soon as they hear flat, they just try to squish the Earth into a pancake and keep everything else the way it is in the heliocentric globular Earth model. Meaning, okay, now you just got this flat disk inside a solar system. And they try to apply the dynamics of the solar system in a massively huge sun 93 million miles away, over a flat Earth, and apply what they know in that paradigm to this paradigm. Well, that doesn't work. If we're on a circular, still flat Earth set on pillars under a dome within which the sun, moon, and stars are placed on day 4, according to the Bible, then the sun and moon are what's moving, and the stars are what are moving, not the Earth, and therefore they are a lot closer and a lot smaller. So I created this animation. You guys have probably seen this. A lot of people have used it in their videos and stuff like that. It got mirrored. Now, I stated right from the start that this was not meant to be to scale. This one's a little better. I still think the sun may be a little bit too big, but you see the sun going over the equator here at an altitude of approximately 3,000 miles, according to this scale right here. And a lot of people will say, well, what is the sun acting like a spotlight? No, it's not acting like a spotlight. And to prove that, I'll bring in a little 3D object here, and I'll bring in a little dome on top of it here to show you that this light is throwing off in all directions, up, down, all around. It's not a spotlight. So all the critics out there, you can stop saying that. It's not shining as a spotlight. It's what's known in 3D as a point light that has been adjusted with a limited light throw attenuation. Now, shortly after I did that video, I was trying to figure out how the 4 seasons work, and you can see that video right here on YouTube, how the 4 seasons work on the flat Earth model. And that one was really interesting. I actually discovered this quite by accident, really. This video came as a result of me trying to figure out on the globe, how does the 24-hour sun work? And so I used Stellarium, which is heliocentric globe-based software. And this software, heliocentric globe-based software, showed the sun and moon speeding up and slowing down as it was creating these circles. And I just thought, well, geez, I wonder what that would look like on the flat Earth map, on the AE map. So I just superimposed it on that, and then I just flipped it horizontally because I'm looking down instead of looking up. And it actually showed the sun and moon going between the tropics and slowing down when it gets in the northern so-called hemisphere and speeding up when it gets in the southern hemisphere. But of course, the critics look at this and they ask a reasonable question.
Does it change speeds? Because the circle's bigger out here in the wintertime going around the Tropic of Capricorn. So what is speeding the sun up and then slowing it back down? It was constantly changing directions and speeds with your model.
Yes, it was. Again, heliocentric globe-based software created that. And interestingly enough, I found a video online that a guy went apparently on the Tropic of Cancer at a certain time of the year, on the equator, and on the Tropic of Capricorn, and videotaped the moon going across the screen. Now, he had it at double speed, and I made it a lot faster just for the sake of this video, but sure enough, the moon was moving at different speeds across his lens. Fastest over the Tropic of Capricorn, medium over the equator, and slowest over the Tropic of Cancer. I'd be curious to see how the Globers explain this. But at least the moon here reflected exactly what Stellarium, heliocentric globe-based software, had depicted. And I can only assume if the moon's doing this, that the sun must be doing the same thing, though I'm unaware of any tests that have been done in that regard.
Number 8. The Coriolis effect means freely moving things like cannonballs or hurricane winds are deflected to the right, but only if you're north of the equator. If you're south of the equator, they're deflected left.
Okay, number 8. The Coriolis effect. Honestly, the whole thing falls apart if this place is not moving. If the Earth is not rotating, you could throw out all of the usual arguments for the Coriolis effect. And there's plenty of evidence to show that this place is not moving. So I could pretty much just end it right here. If the Earth is not rotating, and it's not, then you can throw out pretty much all arguments for the Coriolis effect. But we'll go ahead and get a little deeper into it. And I think probably a good place to start may be to talk about the Foucault pendulum. Here's a clip from a video that Eric Dubay put out called Debunking the Spinning Ball Earth. And in this video, he addresses the Foucault pendulum.
In the mid-19th century, a Frenchman named Léon Foucault became famous for swinging pendulums and claiming their consequent motions were proof of the Earth's diurnal rotation. The showman sets motion and bids the gaping world of thoughtless men and women to behold a proof that we are living on a whirling globe which is rushing away through space. But, since it has been found that, as often as not, the pendulum went round the wrong way for the rotation theory, chagrin has taken place of exultation, and we have a proof of the failure of astronomers in their efforts to substantiate their theory. So to begin with, Foucault's pendulums do not uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, and sometimes counterclockwise. Sometimes they fail to rotate, and sometimes they rotate far too much. Scientists who have repeated variations of the experiment have conceded time and again that, quote, it was difficult to avoid giving the pendulum some slight lateral bias at starting. The behavior of the pendulum actually depends on 1. The initial force beginning its swing, and 2. The ball and socket joint used, which most readily facilitates circular motion over any other.
Okay, now this socket joint thing is rather interesting. About a year or two ago, I went to the Griffith Observatory in Hollywood. And so just below the dome there, you have probably one of the more famous Foucault pendulums here in the United States. Now, listen to what the tour guide had to say about how this thing works.
If you're wondering how we keep it going with an electromagnet. Otherwise, due to air friction, it would slow down. We'd have to jump in there every hour or so and give it a push. But our electromagnet keeps it going even after we close at night. It keeps going and swinging back and forth even after we close.
Not everyone realizes that they actually have a magnetic drive plugged into electricity that keeps them moving. Now, the only reason I know this is because I worked for a construction company that installed one.
You may also want to just Google the Allais effect. I think that's how you say it. Allais, which describes how, oddly enough, solar eclipses can cause Foucault pendulums to do all kinds of weird stuff. Slow down, speed up, go backwards. Lots of interesting anomalies regarding the Foucault pendulum seem to happen when there's an eclipse. But wait a minute, I thought this thing operates because the Earth is rotating. And why should it care about the movement of celestial bodies that are the closest ones over 250,000 miles away, and the other one's 93 million miles away? So why does an alignment in the Copernican model affect Foucault pendulums? There's some interesting things to look at regarding this thing, and frankly, I'm convinced it's just a smoke and mirror parlor trick. Now let's go back to the Eric Dubay commentary.
Also in the mid-19th century, another Frenchman named Gaspard Gustave Coriolis performed several experiments showing the effect of kinetic energy on rotating systems, which have ever since become mythologized as proof of the heliocentric theory. The Coriolis effect is also said to affect bullet trajectories as well.
So as the bullet leaves the barrel of the gun, the Earth is still rotating, and the bullet is not rotating with the Earth. So the Earth will actually rotate out from underneath of the bullet while it is in flight.
Coriolis errors are caused by the Earth's rotation. When a bullet is fired from a gun, it will take a certain amount of time to reach the target. While it is traveling, the target is dropping or rising according to the Earth's rotation. The motion from the Earth's rotation can be split into two components, one that is in the direction of the bullet's flight and one that is perpendicular to the bullet's flight in the vertical direction. For a typical long-range cartridge, the bullet flight time to 1,000 yards is approximately 1.5 seconds. The effect is negated when shooting north or south, and opposite when shooting east or west. When shooting east, the point of impact would be high, and when shooting west, it will be low.
Okay. Allegedly, shooters have to adjust if they're shooting east to west because the target, supposedly is on a rotating Earth, and as soon as the bullet leaves the muzzle, it's going out in the air toward a target that is either allegedly rolling up over the ball towards you or rolling down and away from you on the ball, east to west, depending on which way you're shooting. Well, how could that be negated if you're shooting north or south? How could that be a non-issue? If you're having to chase a target or a target's rushing up on you because the Earth is rotating, then if you're shooting north or south, you should have to adjust either to the left or to the right because that target's also going to be moving in that direction. Because as we've just established, the target's supposedly moving from the west to the east. So they kind of just contradicted themselves, really. Beyond that, okay, the logic is, because of the Coriolis effect of the Earth spinning, if you're shooting in a certain direction, that bullet that's traveling very fast within like 1 to 2 seconds, right? If that, really fast, is going so fast from the muzzle of the weapon to the target. The Earth moved so fast underneath that speeding bullet that you have to adjust to compensate it for it. And yet I could hover a helicopter for a half hour and the next state didn't show up. If the Earth is rotating so fast that a long-range shooter has to compensate so his bullet lands on target, without missing it because it rolled away from him, then airplane and helicopter pilots or frisbee and football throwers should have some major problems because that stuff's going a lot slower than a bullet.
Why does the Coriolis effect affect most storms, but not all?
It is true that hurricanes rotate one way in the so-called northern hemisphere and another way in the so-called southern hemisphere. But we've just established that the Earth is not rotating. So whatever is going on, it has nothing to do with the Earth's rotation. And I'm just going to put this forward for some consideration. I saw a video that Carly Sunshine put out where this woman just took like a plate and moved it across a pool, and it created these vortexes that were spinning in opposite directions and went all the way across the pool. So could it be that there is an ether that Tesla and many others believed in for a long time until Einstein came along and came up with a bunch of math problems to nullify the ether? That if there is some sort of medium through which the sun and moon are going, then maybe as these heavenly luminaries go through this ether, perhaps it creates some sort of current which makes the winds flow in very specific ways on either side of the path of the sun and moon. So maybe it's just the movement of these heavenly bodies going through the ether that are creating vortexes that just so happen to spin one way if you're on the inside of the circle and one way if you're on the outside. Either way, whatever's going on is affected by the equator. Maybe this is an easier way to visualize it. You see the sun moving along its happy path here, and it's creating in its wake opposite rotating vortexes as it goes. You know, in the northern hemisphere, it's rotating counterclockwise, and the southern clockwise. And interestingly enough, I found this animation done by a YouTube channel called Tech Insider. And it says that it turns out tropical storms don't come to within 5 degrees latitude of the equator. Wonder why? And it says they will likely never cross it either. And that's because of the winds pushing the storms away from the equator. Well, I mean, if that's the path of a localized sun and moon going around the circle of the earth, it just kind of makes sense that they're not going to get in the path of it. They're going to only be affected by, if you will, the wake that's left behind through the ether. Anyway, for me, the whole thing is resolved by the fact that the earth is not rotating.
Number 7, triangles. If you walk 10,000 kilometers straight along the Earth's surface, turn 90 degrees to your right, walk 10,000 kilometers more, turn right again, and walk another 10,000 kilometers, you'll be back to where you started, having successfully made a triangle with 3 90-degree angles. As any geometry student can tell you, this is impossible on a flat surface.
So what? This isn't a proof of anything. You can make a 90-degree triangle on a ball. Ooh, wow. How is that a proof that the Earth's a globe? That's ridiculous. Guess what? I can draw a perfect circle inside a triangle. That means the Earth's a pyramid. This is a proof? All he proved is that you could draw a 90-degree triangle on a ball. Wow.
Number 6. The sun, in general, gets lower and lower in the sky as you travel away from the equator, and you can use this to directly measure the Earth's curvature. Pick 2 places a few hundred miles directly north and south of each other, and at noon, measure the shadows cast by a vertical meter stick at each location. You can use the shadow lengths to figure out the angle between the sticks, and once you add in how far apart they are, you can calculate the Earth's curvature.
Okay, this is basically a repackaged version of the Eratosthenes experiment, where if you assume you have a distant stationary sun, and that distant stationary sun is shining straight down on, let's say, a stick or an obelisk, so there's hardly any shadow at all. The shadow is like, right in line with the pole itself going into the ground. And then, at some distance, let's say to the north, there's another obelisk or stick in the ground, and the distance between the two, and that one's casting a longer shadow. Well, you'd say, well, the only way that's possible is if the Earth is on a globe. Reasonable assumption. And actually, as a mathematician, it was a brilliant deduction. However, the same thing works if you've got a sun that's small and localized and moving over the Earth, that you could get a shadow like that. I mean, I created this model right here that shows exactly that. They got the little point light over an obelisk here, then I move it over, and look at how the shadows change, boys and girls. It doesn't require the Earth to be a globe.
Number 5. The stars at night change as you go north or south. For example, Orion is upside down if you're in Australia.
Ooh, wow. Okay, please pay close attention now, because I'm about to show you something really complicated. Are you ready for it? Here it is. Wow, that's amazing. But it didn't require me being on a ball. So that's a stupid reason.
Number 4. Ferdinand Magellan, and many people afterwards, circumnavigated the Earth. That means he left headed west, continued going west, and came back to where he started, still going west. Actually, Magellan was dead, but one of his ships, led by Juan Sebastian Elcano, finished the journey.
Yeah, this is one that comes up a lot. Oh, people have circumnavigated the world going east or west. Well, so what? That's if north is your center, on a disk, I mean, you're navigating the same way either way. So let's say you're on a ball and you want to go east. Well, you keep the compass heading north 90 degrees off to your left and you start walking. If you want to go west, you keep it 90 degrees off to your right and you keep walking. You're using the north to determine what is east and west. Well, same thing on a circle. Circumnavigation on a circle is exactly the same as circumnavigation on a ball.
Number 3, the horizon. Ships on the ocean or tall Chicago buildings viewed over Lake Michigan disappear bottom first. And you can see the sunset twice if you watch it lying down and then quickly stand up. The simple fact is, if the Earth were flat, there wouldn't be a horizon beyond which things could disappear. So from across Lake Michigan, you'd be able to see all of Chicago, as well as the Rocky Mountains.
Now, what's interesting about this video is it was done December 28th, 2012. So good 3 years or so before the whole flat Earth thing. But no, you wouldn't be able to see all the way to the Rockies because there exists this crazy thing called our atmosphere. It's quite dense, and so much the more so when compounded over long distances. As for the Chicago skyline being seen from the other side of Lake Michigan, it is very interesting that this picture would show up about 3 years after the Top 10 Proofs video was done. Then, of course, we had the weatherman saying,
"And what you're seeing here is a mirage."
So Rick Hummer and I got in a boat and we proved that it was not a mirage, but the actual city. Of course, we had plenty of criticism, though, such as,
at a viewing height of 6 feet, we calculate that 2,166 feet should be below the horizon at 60 miles. So they are right that the entire city of Chicago should be completely hidden. And it is hidden nearly all the time, but sometimes it can be seen from that far away due to a type of atmospheric light refraction phenomenon called a superior mirage. A superior mirage is caused by colder air below warmer air, which bends the light around the curve of the Earth. This event sometimes makes the news for the very reason that it is a rare occurrence. If the Earth was flat, you could see the buildings on any clear day, not just rarely when the conditions are right for refraction. Flat earthers use these rare events to try to prove the Earth is flat, but that makes no sense. It's called cherry picking. You don't get to pick the anomalies that seem to agree with your views and ignore the common observations that don't, and still call yourself an honest investigator. That is intellectually dishonest.
gotta love the critics. Okay, so I'll show you more about what I think is going on with atmospheric lensing shortly. Until then, let's see who's going to pick and choose what common observations they're going to accept and or ignore. Here's an interesting video I saw online regarding a full day time lapse revealing superior mirages. Now, this is quite extraordinary, actually. This is from skunkbayweather.com, September 7th, 2012. Notice the buildings and the shoreline here over on the left. Keep your eye on that. Just watch that, and the mountain in the background. Everything's pretty cool. You can see pretty much everything there, but as the day progresses, and we are now at 9:30 a.m. and it's 59 degrees, 60 degrees, it's getting warmer, the temperature is changing, we start to see some miraging take place, right? It starts to distort things a little bit. Ooh, look at that. The water seems like it's getting higher, and we're losing buildings, and we're losing the beach. Here it is now, noon, 63 degrees and climbing. Uh-oh, there it goes. Oh, there it is again. Oh, it's all miraged. Huh, it's all distorted. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. The default is to see it, though. That's the point. The default is minus distorting atmospheric conditions, you would be able to see everything clearly. But due to different temperature variations and density in the atmosphere and whatnot, sometimes you can see the whole shoreline and the buildings, sometimes you can't. But the magic trick is not in being able to see it. It's what is taking place that obscures your ability to do so. Look at this. And the mountains in the background shrink and expand and everything too. Look at the comparison right here. The one on the right at 5:44 p.m., 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Can't really see anything on the left shoreline there. And on the left at 9:43 a.m., when it was 59 degrees Fahrenheit, we can see the shoreline, we can see buildings, trees, all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, either this is, filling up and draining so that the water level is higher or lower, or it's due to atmospheric lensing and distortions, refraction, and all that good stuff, causing us to not be able to see it at certain times. I think that's exactly what's going on Lake Michigan. And again, based on that imagery that I saw looking 46 miles across versus 0.6 miles across, I really do believe that, just like the experts said, the globalist guys, they are the ones that said, hey, the atmosphere really is acting like a lens, and they put a lens in front of the camera to show how it works. Again, more on this shortly.
Number 2. During a lunar eclipse, the shadow of the Earth on the moon is curved.
The following is from a radio show I did back in 2015, talking about the issue of lunar eclipses. Now, we'll talk about the eclipses in a second, but believe it or not, many people believe that the phases of the moon are also caused by the shape and shadow of the Earth. I mean, I wish I had $1 for every time somebody called me an idiot while claiming that the phases of the moon are caused by the shape of the Earth. The Earth is not responsible for the phases of the moon, even in the spinning heliocentric NASA-based model. It's not. They say that the phases of the moon are caused by the angles of the sun's light hitting the moon. And speaking of angles, ever notice on days when the sun and moon are up at the same time, the terminator line on the moon is often quite off from where it should be if it were in fact reflecting the light from the sun?
Okay, now see the sun going down in the west over there, and go this way and up, and there's the moon with the shadow angled this way. So you would think that if the moon is reflecting the light of the sun, that the sun should be shining this way. Problem is, the sun is now way down here. Look at the terminator line of the shadow. You would think the light should be coming directly across from it, but it's not. It's way down there. The angle is totally wrong for that shadow.
So, if the moon is not reflecting light as it should, could the moon actually be exactly as the scriptures say it is? You've got a number of scriptures saying that the moon is a light. It's a lesser light, according to Genesis. And in Isaiah and Ezekiel, it talks about the sun causing her light to shine or giving her light. There's nothing in Scripture that indicates that it's a reflector. And so back to the Griffith Observatory, you would think for the display on lunar phases that you would see a moon going around tidal locked to the Earth such that the same face is always pointing toward the Earth. And as it's rotating around the Earth with the same face always pointing toward the Earth, see how the phases work. I mean, you would think that they would have a display like that, but they didn't. What did they have? They had a self-illuminating moon going around in a circle, creating the moon phases. But, I'm having a hard time with that whole reflector thing, especially when you realize that anytime you have a reflector, it's going to bounce back the same light that is shined on it. And we've found that that is not the case, that the moon gives off a totally different light. The sun gives off warm light or hot light, and the moon gives off a cold light. So I'm going to set up my whiteboard just like I did before, with it facing toward the direct moonlight. And I'll get my iPhone here to focus up on my thermometer. Okay, let's do a test here. And it's 80.9 degrees in direct moonlight, and shooting underneath here, it's 89.6 degrees in the full moon light. So 9 whole degrees different All I did is take a foam core, trifold thing you can get at Walmart and set it up, reflecting the light of the moon. And it showed it was 9 degrees warmer in the shade of the moon than it was in direct moonlight. That's a totally different kind of light. The light of the sun brings life to living organisms and stuff, and there's documentation about how the light of the moon does the exact opposite. It aids in decay. It's a totally different light. All right, so now that we've established that, let's get to the topic of lunar eclipses. And I'll go back to a video that I did back in 2015. So if the phases of the moon are not caused by the shadow of the Earth, what about the lunar eclipse? Now, that one everybody seems to understand to be the result of the moon going into the Earth's shadow, as depicted here. You have the Earth's penumbra and the Earth's umbra. And as the moon starts to go into the umbra side of it, that's where somehow the dark shadow of the Earth makes the moon turn red. That's what all the charts and everything show, but is that really the case? Well, let's see. This author points out some really interesting things regarding lunar eclipses and solar eclipses as well. Dr. Robotham goes on to say, besides the above difficulties or incompatibilities, many cases are on record of the sun and moon being eclipsed when both were above the horizon. That's a big problem. The sun, the earth, and the moon not in a straight line, but the earth below the sun and moon, out of the reach or direction of both, and yet a lunar eclipse has occurred. Is it possible that a shadow of the earth could be thrown upon the moon when sun, earth, and moon were not in the same line? Bessel, the greatest astronomer of our time, in a letter to myself in July 1844 said, I do indeed continue in the belief that Procyon and Sirius are both true double stars, each consisting of one visible and one invisible star. Another quote, the belief in the existence of non-luminous stars was prevalent in Grecian antiquity and especially in the early times of Christianity. It was assumed that among the fiery stars which are nourished by vapors, there move other earthly bodies which remain invisible to us. That's from Origen. Another one by Diogenes of Apollonica. Stars that are invisible and consequently have no name move in space together with those that are visible. Lambert, in his cosmological letters, admits the existence of, quote, dark cosmological bodies of great size. Now, if all this is true, this may solve the problem of what do we do with things like this Planet X Nibiru thing, which even in the spinning heliocentric globe model is reckoned to be a dark planetary body. So, and of course, scientists are all talking about dark matter and everything today, even in that standard model. So if people can talk about dark bodies in the spinning heliocentric globe expanding universe model, then why couldn't we apply the same thing to the flat Earth enclosed model? What if there are dark bodies within the dome? Robotham continues, we have now seen that the existence of dark bodies revolving about the luminous objects in the firmament has been admitted by practical observers from the earliest ages, and that in our own day, such a mass of evidence has accumulated on the subject that astronomers are compelled to admit that not only dark bodies, which occasionally obscure the luminous stars when in conjunction, but that cosmological bodies of large size exist, and that, quote, one at least is attached as a satellite to this Earth, end quote. It is this dark or, quote, non-luminous satellite, end quote, which when in conjunction or in line with the moon and an observer on Earth is the immediate cause of a lunar eclipse. So if nothing else, here's some things to think about, okay? I'm finding evidence both scientifically, at least from the 1800s, people writing in various scientific journals, as well as historical accounts of the ancients talking about a dark body that could be responsible for causing the moon to go into lunar eclipse. And frankly, the whole idea of the moon going into a blood red lunar eclipse while the sun is still up, in my mind, obliterates the whole idea that the lunar eclipse is due to the sun, earth, and moon being in a line and the moon in the shadow of the earth. It doesn't work.
And to the west, we have the moon in a total lunar eclipse. It's blood red. See that? So how can there be a lunar eclipse? How can the Earth be causing that when the sun is up over here?
I also had the chance to observe an interesting blood red lunar eclipse on September 27th, 2015. And when I did, the so-called shadow of the Earth didn't appear on the moon as it should have. Whatever eclipsed it came from the wrong direction. Here's a clip from the video I did on that.
It's where the moon popped up. The only problem is the sun had just set about an hour and 45 minutes earlier right behind us, and yet the shadow was coming from this direction, which is north. How did the shadow from the Earth being cast by the sun, which set in the west, end up coming from the north? Sun went down in the west right behind us. Shadow of the Earth came from the north on the left side of the moon, which is the side facing north. So if the sun went down behind us in the west, you would think the shadow would have been on the bottom of the moon instead of the left side of the moon.
And number 1, we know the Earth is round because we have photographic evidence.
The photographic evidence. You would think this would be the slam dunk for the Globe Camp. Unfortunately, it is anything but that. In fact, the more you look into the issue of alleged photographic evidence, honestly, the worse it gets. Here's a clip from my introduction to the topic that I gave at the Edmonton Flat Earth Conference.
And in the process of looking around in videos, I stumbled across this guy right here, Matthew Boylan, right? And he has this whole presentation where is it a painting or is it a picture? And along those lines, I started to think about that. And the thing that all of these photographs have in common is that they are all artwork. And take a look at that, the top two especially. That's not a photograph of wine glasses and bottles of wine. That's a painting, photorealistic painting. The bottom four images are actually done by a friend of mine. The bottom left is, none of those actually are sculptures. The bottom left is a painting of a sculpture, and the other ones are drawings. Okay? Now, yeah, I said the same thing, right? You look at that and you say, wow, and well, let's put it a little bit into perspective here. Which do you think is harder to paint? Yeah, just looking at the wine bottle ones, or any of them really, I'm like, the ball Earth right there pales in comparison artistically. So I started to think about what this guy's talking about, his stand-up routine. I'm going, I gotta say, he makes a compelling case. Well, they come right out and tell you, actually.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals and developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like? Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer. If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these two words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this. And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels. You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon.
Just something to think about.
So is this just one more piece of space art? Good question. This picture was allegedly taken from Apollo 17, and it is by far the most powerful sphere of influence ever found in a single image, pun intended. But is it authentic? Well, first you have to determine if the Apollo programs were legitimate. If this is new to you, I'd suggest you watch these videos right here. Then spend a lot of time on the website aulis.com, AULIS.com, and look at all the evidence that is presented there, which more than suggests that the Apollo program was a fraud. Now, as a former NASA fanboy myself, I have to say that was a really hard pill to swallow. But over the last few years, I've become more than convinced that we never went to the moon. And this belief was only further solidified the more I began to analyze the pictures allegedly shot on the moon. I have to say, I don't think they counted on Photoshop. Because you can take these images into image processing software such as Photoshop, adjust the contrast, and see stuff like this. Strange masks and rectangular boxes around the Earth. I even found one on the Apollo 17 mission itself, right here on the NASA website, Scientists on the Moon. Click on this picture right here. Supposedly the same mission, same guys that took the picture of the most famous picture of our Earth. I'm going to do save image as, and let's see, Apollo Moon. Let's call it Apollo Moon 17. And I'm going to open that in Photoshop. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on the Earth. I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Levels, and I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. Why is there a square box around the Earth allegedly taken from the scientists on the moon in Apollo 17? And people wonder why I don't trust NASA. That's why I don't trust NASA. I mean, they're always out there saying, you know, Rob, everybody's trying to show you stuff from space, and you keep rejecting it. This is why I reject it. These guys are liars. So, I mean, if we never went to the moon, then this picture is not real. Since then, they've put out many more what they call blue marble alleged photographs of our Earth. The problem is they're all vastly different. The continent sizes change from year to year. The colors change. There's no consistency. The most famous one of the blue marbles was the one done in 2002. But if you take it into Photoshop and start zooming in on it, you begin to see where clouds were replicated using the clone tool. I mean, even its creator, Rob Simmons, admits it is Photoshop, but it has to be. And when you look into time-lapse videos, it's just as bad, if not worse. Here's the one that got me questioning everything. You can check it out on the JPL website. Supposedly, it was shot from the Galileo space probe back in 1990. Well, I mean, the first thing that caught my attention was none of the clouds are moving. I could take my camera outside, point it up at the sky for an hour, speed it up in my computer, and see the clouds doing all kinds of stuff. But on that day back in 1990, this didn't happen anywhere in the world. And NASA and JPL are bad enough, but the stuff coming from other countries isn't any better. In 2008, this video was put out allegedly shot from a Japanese satellite. Besides looking pathetically amateur, where are all the stars? I mean, look, we get all these images from Hubble, right? Space is full of stars, beautiful colors, nebula, stuff like that. Every time we watch a sci-fi movie, you know, the planets are hanging there against the backdrop of zillions of stars. But when it comes to any alleged satellite imagery of our Earth, we never see any stars. Even HD footage like this, you can beef up the contrast and look. I mean, HD's got a lot of information. There's no information in this video for stars. I mean, it should look something like this, but it doesn't. Later, I saw this video from 2011. I think it's supposedly from a Russian satellite. And it also allegedly represents a real time lapse of one full day of the Earth. And when I compare this with the one from 1990, both again full day time lapses, the striking difference becomes obvious. I think what we're seeing here is merely the advancement in computer animation technology over the course of about 20 years. And here's an example of that technology. This is 100% CGI and admitted to be such. And then we have what I call the bozo Earth of 2015. And just like back in 1990, once again, the clouds aren't morphing. You can back it up, freeze frame it, go back and forth with it, you'll see the clouds aren't morphing, changing, or anything. They are just following the ball as it rolls around in a time-lapse animation. And don't even get me started on all the problems with this moon. I've got longer videos that deal with that. So if we put them all together, once again, when it comes to time-lapse videos, just like the still imagery, there's no consistency. Over and over and over again, I was finding doctored imagery and or stuff openly identified in the fine print as being a composite image or some form of CGI. The question is, why? Suffice to say, we simply cannot trust imagery from NASA or any other nation's space agency. It's all garbage. And the sad part is it's only going to get worse because computer software just keeps getting better and better and better. For instance, Andrew Kramer from Video Copilot just released this plugin for After Effects.
Alright, so there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with this plugin, and you'll be even more amazed when you see how fast and easy it is to use.
So there you go. You just can't trust what's coming. You know, they say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, I mean, if someone continues to believe a proven pathological liar, well, then they're an idiot. So, you know, I'm saying let's not be idiots here. These people have proven themselves time and time again to be fraudulent. Once you realize the Apollo program was bogus, start looking into the space shuttle program. There's a lot of interesting things about that. And then, of course, start looking into the ISS. And you got to ask yourself, if we know for a fact that they faked stuff in Apollo, and we've got reasonable doubt about some of the space shuttle missions, and more videos coming out exposing the ISS with footage just like this, there's lots of stuff out there. There's some really good YouTubers out there who have been watching these guys like a hawk and pulling down footage like this. These people are lying to us with our money. Tens of millions of dollars a day they're lying to us. So yeah, when you've got so many videos exposing what's going on up there as a fraud, I'm sorry, but the so-called photographic evidence simply is not that compelling, especially if you actually take the time to look into it.
All right. So that's a 45-minute version of the 6-hour version. If you want more, you can check that out on my YouTube channel, and other people have done the same thing. So, and I did all that before even becoming convinced of the things that I believe today. As a globe earther, looking at these proofs going, our proofs aren't really that good. And if you think we're going to Mars, man, the pictures aren't any better. You know, people out there finding pictures that are supposedly from the probe on Mars, right? And yet we find places on Earth that coincidentally look exactly the same when you take the red filter off. And oh yeah, we have discovered life on Mars. They got squirrels up there. You know, people zooming in on the high resolution pictures and finding squirrels and stuff. You know, and you know, look up Devon Island. You know, Jaron was the first one that I saw pointing this out. He did a video on it, and I went and looked it up myself. And you could go on Google Earth and check it out for yourself. You know, what they're doing on Devon Island, they could just as easily pass for everything that they show us that is supposedly from Mars. Do you really believe that we have a remote-controlled doom buggy on Mars? I can barely get cell phone reception in here. We're like, with a little doom buggy on Mars? Wow. If you think Elon Musk is your savior, yeah, there's a lot of crazy, interesting things about Elon Musk. In fact, my friend Gons from the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel did a video just recently on what appears to be the Luciferian family ties to this guy, Illuminati and whatnot. Check it out if you haven't seen it. His Face Like the Sun is his YouTube channel. Look it up. It's a fairly recent upload that he did. And actually, I was talking with Nathan Roberts last night. We went out to eat, and he apparently, he may talk about it later, met a guy who claims to be Elon Musk's nephew, and some of the stories he told him, wow. But perhaps the most interesting of all, how many of you have ever heard the name Elon before you heard of Elon Musk? Anybody? That's a weird name, right? I've never heard that name before. And yet, in the 1950s, Wernher von Braun wrote a fiction novel called Project Mars, A Technical Tale. In chapter 24, How Mars is Governed, it says the Martian government was directed by, I can't barely read that, 10 men, something like that. Anyway, it says the leader of them is Elon. The leader of the men on Mars in the government is a leader by the name of Elon, written in the 1950s. Maybe it's a coincidence, right?
Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, like the video, and share it on your favorite social media sites. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned and we'll see you back next time.